continuing on this strange journey, strange for us because I'm talking a little bit more about things like character and how do we follow Jesus. And so this week we're going to talk a little bit about one of my favorite things to do, though I haven't done it for a while, and that's gardening. Because I am convinced that in some ways following Jesus is like caring for a garden. Because caring for a garden, frankly, takes some planning. Now's the time to be thinking about what you're going to be doing, even though there is all this snow on the ground, to think through what it is you want to grow, particularly if you're going to do a vegetable garden. But it takes a lot of work. You have to prepare the soil. You have to plant the seeds. It takes watering and weeding, and then waiting, and waiting, and waiting. Because despite all of the work that you can put into in a garden, there is nothing that you can really do to make it grow. You really can only help it prepare to grow. But you can't make anything grow. You get to watch it grow. You only can prepare. You can only participate in the preparation, and then you have to wait patiently, even as you are working. Add to this, you can't really control the weather. You can't control the animals that might come by and take it, or for that matter, for those who've ever worked in a community garden, the neighbors who come by and steal what you have grown. We call that just sharing what we have. But the truth of the matter is, this isn't easy for me. The truth of the matter is, if the computer doesn't respond quickly, I can get seriously annoyed. Think about that in our own lives. It is almost the antithesis of the way we live our lives. We want immediate results. We want quick knowledge. We can at any moment answer a question that we do not know simply by pulling out our phones and getting an answer. And if we can't get a signal, we get annoyed. And here we come along and say that following Jesus is like doing something that is exactly the opposite, where we prepare and we work hard and we're not sure what the results might even look like. And in some ways, I have come to see that even planting a garden, a small garden, is a way for each one of us to grasp what really is in our control and what is beyond our control. So our life of faith really is the calling to prepare the soil. That's it. We're not responsible for the fruits. We'll talk about the vine in a minute. It is not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to practice our faith, to learn as much as we can, to pray, to serve one another, and then to let God sort out the rest. Now, you know, the history of the church universal has been one where we've wanted to figure out. We've wanted to guarantee results. We are now working with great marketing companies. I will tell you there are Presbyterian churches who are using facial recognition software to keep track of who is in the pews on a Sunday morning. I suppose that helps when your congregation is 6,000 people, that this is actually going on. Now, I'm not giving a hard time to my friends who are pastors there, but they even laugh themselves. But this is what's happening. The truth of the matter is, so much of that is really beyond our control. So we're called to prepare ourselves. And so this is what this Lenten journey is all about. It's a time for us to stop and to examine our lives wherever we are and to realize that following Jesus is about living what was once called the examined life. It's not really unique to Christianity at all. But the idea that if we want to follow Jesus, that we have to prepare ahead of time. We have to plan out where we want to do, where we want to grow. How do we know where we are on this journey? In some ways, these pictures represent not just the journey of life, but sort of multiple journeys in life. Sometimes we're in various places along this way. Sometimes we're at a new part. Something new is going on. The hope and the expectation is sort of like that seed form, and then it grows. And we're in a season of growth and power. And the truth is, when we get to that full-grown stage, that's when life begins to end. And sometimes we can feel like our life is end. When everything falls apart, we're like that dead stump. And then lo and behold, when we thought all was lost, the next thing you know, new life starts to come about. And the truth is, sometimes it can happen without our participation, but more often than not, we're more prepared to handle those things when we are prepared. And as I said, this isn't really unique to Christianity. Even though that Paul talks about putting the old self away, you can look through the history of the world, and you have philosophers and others say that there is, what was it Socrates said? That the unexamined life is not worth living. Pretty powerful stuff. But I think on some level what he was trying to get at is that we have been marked with the ability to transcend our instincts and our desires and to make conscious, ethical choices in life. And then at the end of the day, I think he says that those who do not examine their lives fail to live as full human beings. I think in some ways what we would say is that following Jesus is trying to figure out how best to live our lives and to live those places in our life where we have the image of God. Jesus called people to live more fully, not to follow laws or to ignore laws completely, but to live on a higher plane. That was this idea of examining our lives. That can be difficult, because on some level, some of us are wired to say we just want it laid out neatly in front of us. Give us the rules. Tell us what we're supposed to do so I can check off the boxes, and then we're set. And Jesus comes along and messes all that up, particularly with the rich young ruler who comes to him and said, I followed all the laws since I was little. Am I ready? And Jesus says, you lack one thing. Go and sell all you have, give to the poor, then come and follow me. It turns out that despite following all the laws, he probably was bound by money in ways that resembled idolatry that he wasn't even aware of. And then, on the other hand, you have folks who say, well, we can just do whatever we want, whatever I feel like doing. The problem is that most of our feelings are fickle and strange, and most of the time they won't lead us down a path of growing. And so what Jesus is really saying, for example, like the woman caught in adultery, that they're prepared to stone, right? And Jesus says this really interesting thing. He's looking down in the dirt. While all these men are prepared to stone this woman, we don't know where the man who committed adultery was, but that's a story for another day. And he's looking into the dirt, drawing something, who knows what it is, and he says to the crowd, those who are without sin, throw the first stone. And he finally looks up, and all of those men are gone, and the woman is standing there. Her life has been saved. And he says, go, sin no more. In other words, we are not bound by the rules, but then again, we're not bound by our instincts to do whatever we want, whenever we want. It's sort of like growing up, right? We think about it as children. When we're left to our own devices, it takes a process to figure out, oh, I need to get up. I need to do things. I can't just do whatever I want, whenever I want. That is sort of like the Christian life, which requires more of us. So for those who don't want any rules at all, Jesus is going to frustrate you if you look close enough. And for those who want all of the rules neat, laid out in front of you, well, Jesus is really going to frustrate those folks. And this is part of what goes on in the life of our denomination and the life of our church. It's why we're fighting with one another. It's why the Presbyterian Church has fought, will fight, and continue to fight well long after we're all gone. The Presbyterian Church likes to fight and split. But we're not the only ones. It's the fight between those who say no, Jesus says no rules, and other folks who say yes, all the rules. The question is, we all recognize that no one's following all the rules. And this is what the life of faith is about. Trying to figure out that hard work of what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus. The image of the vine, I really like a lot. Now that's a different move. Now we're moving out of the vegetable garden image, and we're moving into this vine dresser. Well, when I lived in Chattanooga, Tennessee, there was this enormous bush that was in the front of the rental house where we lived. And it stood probably, I don't know, probably at the bottom of these pipes up here on the front, from the floor up there. And I was foolish enough to think that I could prune that thing in order to bring new life. And I asked the landlord, I worked landscaping, and he said, hey, whatever you want to do with it to burning it down is fine. As long as you don't burn the house down. He didn't really care. And so I spent weeks working on this shrub. And so I'd climb up underneath it, and I would prune, and I would pull things out, and I'd work on it. And finally one day, it came to me, at some point, it's time to just cut the thing down. And that's what I did. I cut it completely to the ground in one big push. We pushed it down the hill, because there's lots of hills in Chattanooga. And I literally just pushed it into the street. Fortunately, the city came and took it away, but there was this giant bush. And he laughed because he said, I know how long. It was so intertwined, and there was so much death underneath it, that the life on top that I thought we could save in that bush was being cut out. You couldn't even clip the limbs out from underneath. They were so intertwined that after cutting and clipping and cutting, it was still all connected. And here's the interesting thing is, a couple of years ago, I was back in Chattanooga, and guess what was in that front yard? There was a new, well-pruned shrub that was in that front yard from that same stump. So sometimes there is this idea that in our own lives, there's stuff that we need to just get rid of. And that's probably true corporately, that we just need a new start. We need to take out, prune out, get rid of those things that we know, frankly, aren't helping us in the life that we're called to live. And so this is what Lent is about. It's not just about giving up things, but sometimes it can be. It's not about, oh, well, that's what Catholics do. It's, there's some wisdom in this, of changing the routine of our lives to live differently. To say, you know what, for these weeks, I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to think about living differently. Sometimes just changing our perspective can help us live more fully. And that is what we're called to do. The truth is, I know that in each one of our own lives, there are places that probably need to be cut off at the ground and hope for new life. Use our energy in life-giving ways. So my hope and prayer in the coming weeks is that you're able to find where those places are in your own lives and in our own collective life together, so that we might finally decide that it's time to prune this and to let that go and maybe push that giant bush down the hill so that new life can come where we only expected a mess.